Hi listeners, Jason here. PHSCon 2024 was nothing short of amazing. We had 400 community members come together, both in person and online, to rapidly progress our understanding and practice of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. Over the 2 days, we laughed together, we were inspired, and we learnt. If you missed out, don't worry, on-demand access to content is now available at phscon.com. Plans are already underway for a bigger and better PHSCon back in Sydney for 2025. So save the date for next year when we return to a larger venue on June 19th and 20th. Now, on to this episode.
Different generations have different views of work, the workplace, and the relationships people can and should have within the workplace. There's a view that the future of work is human first, and we're going to hear from a consultant and content creator at the forefront of this movement. Up next on this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each week, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk psychological health and safety. Welcome to this week's Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. So in 2024, 4 generations will be active in the workplace. Baby boomers born between 1946 and 64, Generation X born between 1965 and 1980, Millennials born between 1981 and 2000, and Generation Z born between 2001 and 2020. According to Glassdoor, Gen Z will account for more of the U.S. workforce than baby boomers for the first time in 2024. This is due to the baby boomer generation reaching retirement age and Gen Z entering the workforce after graduating. According to Forbes Business Council, Generation Z and Millennials are rewriting the workplace rules, becoming more inclusive, open-minded, and independent than previous generations. They also are less materialistic and value happiness and fulfillment over financial compensation. Another growing view is that work should be human-first centered. A human-first approach prioritizes individuals' needs and experiences above all else. It's also known as user-first, user-focused, people-centric, and human-centered. My guest believes in this approach and helps others understand it. So let's get started with an introduction of my guest by my guest with this question. Who is Danielle Roberts?
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate that introduction and all of those stats. Super helpful to level set for this conversation. My name is Danielle, and I'm a future of work coach and consultant, and I'm on a mission to ultimately create that human-first future of work. I spent 12 years working in corporate social media marketing before, I was trying to find my dream job before realizing that there was no such thing. And over the past several years, especially since COVID, I've been building out my consultancy to have these important conversations and create a future of work that prioritizes workers' needs and humanity and well-being, especially with technological shifts, globalization shifts. We're long overdue for systemic reform in the workforce, and I am basically here to help usher that in.
Absolutely. So when you hear psychological health and safety, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it's the ability to show up as myself and have a regulated nervous system. I am hyper aware of not just what I'm accomplishing, but the manner in which I'm accomplishing my work. So how I am feeling in the process of pursuing whatever I'm pursuing. So I think when I think of psychological safety, if you asked me 5 years ago, I would think of it very much in terms of mindset. And now I think of it as a whole body approach. Like, how are my thoughts informing my feelings, informing my perception of the world? And do I feel grounded in that, or does it feel anxious and from a place of fear? And I generally think of psychological safety in 5 different areas that prioritize humanness. First and foremost, necessities, like, are my basic level needs being met from a financial capacity, from a wellness capacity? Assurance, like, how safe and secure am I in my relationships, in my foundations outside of the workplace? Belonging and community, how well am I showing up in the communities that I am in? Upward mobility, how well am I advancing forward and expressing my curiosity and allowing myself to be fully self-expressed? And then in terms of overall holistic happiness, like, how does my life feel right now? So I take all of those things into account when I'm looking at psychological safety and figuring out what might be missing and what I might need to change moving forward.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that could be a master class in and of itself, just breaking down those 5 areas and having people think about those. I, I just don't. It's leaving me almost speechless because as I start to think about when I entered the workforce many years ago, I didn't think about any of that. I really didn't. I didn't. I just showed up, and as a matter of fact, my first real job was actually throwing newspapers when I was about 11 years old. And after I got robbed a couple of times, I decided that wasn't going to work for me. And I end up in the working in, kind of retail, grocery stores and fast food and that type of thing. But not once did I think about any of those 5 areas. And I don't think that my experience is all that unique. I think what is unique is what you have to share and what you're trying to help folks see and help, not just the next generation, but the now generation. I think there are folks that, have gotten to, my number of birthdays who kind of looked around and went, you know what, this isn't really what I signed up for. So tell me a bit more about what you describe as anti-career.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so I'm a content creator as well, and I show up online as the anti-career coach. And that's basically challenging the conventional notions of what we've all been taught about success and happiness. We're taught if we go to school, we work hard, then we can realize the American dream. But what we're seeing is that for the boomer generation, they're probably the last generation that can fully realize that dream, at least in the way that it was sold to us. And younger generations are seeing through the smoke and mirrors a little bit and saying, you know what, we only live once. We have endured unprecedented event after unprecedented event, and we do not want to wait until retirement to enjoy this one precious life that we get. Just in the past 4 years, we all just endured a global pandemic, and we have had no time to recover. And really, being anti-career is questioning what work is for. And we've all been taught that money and social status are the greatest indicators of success in life. And I fully believe that that's a lie. Of course, money is important to be able to do things and afford our lifestyle, but it's not the only thing. We need to prioritize the things that make us human and prioritize what success means to us so we can divest from hustle culture that wants to convince us that we're never doing enough, that we will never have enough, and really level set of what does enough look and feel like in my life, and how can I use my job to just invest in what makes everything in life meaningful rather than making work the center of my identity.
Right. Yeah, I can say, particularly over the last, 3 or 4 years, and really, my description of the pandemic is that it really didn't change much of anything, but it exposed most of everything. Because
Yes.
what was going on well before the pandemic. It was, this whole, discussion about the quote unquote American dream that has been the American nightmare for a lot of people. And I try my best not to be critical of those who believe in it, who have, for them it's worked, but for a lot of people it hasn't. It just hasn't worked. And when it starts not to work for you, what you're told is, well, you need to work harder. You need to do more. So you're telling me that the thing that I'm not doing isn't working, so I should do more of it? And I think folks are just getting a little wiser and going like, I'm not sure if I want to do that. And also, and you made me think about this, also the folks that have decided that the traditional lifestyle of go to college, go to trade school, get a job, work for 30 years, be miserable the entire time, so I can afford a house that's probably bigger than I need and a car that sucks down a bunch of gas. Maybe there's another way of doing that. I'm really, my wife and I are both fans of folks who do van life and folks who live in RVs and folks who are traveling across the world nomadically. I mean, it's doing the thing that causes you to feel like my life is of value. And to your point, we only have one of them.
Yes.
we only have one. And it's just really neat to see, to see folks like yourself that are actually talking openly about it. I think we've had these conversations to the side. So how do you see the difference between Gen Z specifically, how they see the workplace and how other generations see it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's important to understand that Gen Z grew up with their phone in their hands, right? They are connected. They're being able to talk to other people and empathize with a lot more people's lived experiences, whereas older generations didn't have that. I'm a millennial and I grew up without having the phone in my hand. That came like later in my in my life. And they've also grown up with, millennial or Gen X or even boomer parents who have worked hard and they've seen their employers lay them off or not be treated with respect and dignity and give their loyalty for a company just to be treated like a number on a balance sheet. So they're paving the way forward in terms of what loyalty to an employer looks like and saying, you know what? Work is supposed to pay my bills and contribute to society in a meaningful way. And if it's not going to do that, then I'm going to prioritize myself and jump companies every couple of years if it means increasing my lifetime earning potential. They also grew up understanding like what the gig economy is, and they understand content creation and building side hustles. So they're a lot more creative about approaching their work and finding innovative ways to make money rather than saying, I'm going to get a job and stay there for as long as I am employed and then retire. So I think that's one thing. They have a really strong sense of self-agency and they prioritize their mental health and their work-life balance. Like you said, with stats, they're more willing to jump ship to make sure that those things are prioritized, sometimes ahead of their paycheck, because you can make a lot of money, but if you're pulling 80 hours a week and you're not actually able to enjoy life,
right?
Why bother?
Right.
Another thing that I think is really interesting that I'm excited to see unfold is they don't believe in like the corporate hierarchy as much as previous generations did. They value teamwork and collaboration and a sense of consensus. And that's based on like Stanford research. They want to make sure that their voices are valued and heard. And then they also value advancement and mobility. They want to grow and they want to contribute and they want to be given the space to do that. And I think why we're seeing such a huge gap right now is we have old leadership mindset in place that doesn't create space for these things to happen. So that's why there's so much friction.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned it just a bit in your introduction, but I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about, what was it that took you to see that it could be a little bit different? Because it sounds like you started off, having probably the same inputs that the rest of us had. Go get a job, go do the thing, whatever the thing is. But something or some series of things caused you to go a slightly different way. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So it's been a journey that has evolved over a little more than a decade. I grew up in a very blue collar household. My dad has done tile and marble for 40 years now. He's still working. He's one of the youngest boomers. My mom, she worked at a liquor store. And I was a first generation college student. So I was the first in my family to go to school. And I was very invested in that traditional path of success. I wanted to climb the corporate ladder. I was working in an advertising agency right out of college. And at 23, like pull in 60, 70-hour weeks, because that industry is known for not great work-life balance. They have a bar in the agency to say like 5 o'clock, you can have drinks if it means staying. 7, if you stay till 7, we'll buy you dinner. All of those things that keep you staying at the office. And I was like, yeah, I'm here for it. This must mean I made it. I'm busy, which means I'm important, like all those things. That kind of came to a screeching halt when I was 23, and my mom got diagnosed with cancer for the second time. And within 9 weeks, she had passed away. And I found myself back at my desk after 3 days of bereavement leave. And I was like, what is happening? Like, I skipped family dinners. I didn't take her phone calls because I was at networking events, or I was trying to make a name for myself in the industry. And for what? Like, those are moments I'll never be able to get back with her. So that kind of started my journey of questioning, like, what am I doing? Maybe I haven't been sold the truth. And I thought I just needed to find an industry with better work-life balance and more flexibility. So I tried to change jobs a couple of times over the course of the next decade. And there were always issues, no matter what employer I was with. And I thought that there was something wrong with me, that like, maybe I'm just not like, there's like, everyone else seems to have it figured out. Like, but I was like, oh no, everyone's just really masking in the corporate environment. Right. No one's really being themselves. There is no space to be human. And then finally, I was working in tech during the pandemic, and it was for an online education provider. So we were busier than ever with the shifts to online learning. And then after the pandemic kind of wavered in 2021, I got laid off with hundreds of others. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep like changing boxes, thinking like maybe my dream job is in this next role. And I had that inkling of a thought, what if dream jobs don't exist? What if what I'm looking for doesn't exist? What if I need to not care about the title and the money that I make with that title and how I'm perceived, and I focus on creating a life that feels good and a career that feels good instead? And that's a very long story of how I got into creating my coaching and consultancy and the work that I'm doing now. So it's been a long unlearning and relearning and unlearning again, and just showing up and trying to lead with curiosity at every step of my career to say, like, what's here for me.
Wow. That sounds like there's a book or a movie in that one. Because generations and generations of people have been both told and sold that working hard is the key to success. So again, stay at work as long as possible. We'll make it convenient for you to be there. Having a bar at work, I'm not a drinker, but I find that would be an interesting allure to folks who, hey, come on, have a few drinks, and then you can still, hang out at work longer. You don't have to drive home. There's all these convenient reasons for you to stay there. But, missing time with your mom, that's just, that's horrible. That's horrible that we have that kind of system that, just kind of sucks people in and tells them that's what it's going to be. And the sad thing about it is there's a part of me that, I don't have issue with, big or small organizations making their fair cut. But the sad thing about it is there are hundreds and thousands, maybe millions of people who have your experience. And then there's some individual or some family of folks that have more money than God who don't work really at all. They simply just watch other people, and they're the ones who made that decision to just lay off a bunch of people. So we hired you all. We made plenty of money. Now that we don't have any need for you, we just toss you aside and we cast you back into the system, and then we talk really bad about you, about quote unquote being unemployed.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the FlourishDX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow FlourishDX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
What's the conversation you have with people who believe that the hard work is the way to go?
Yeah. So first, the way that our system is set up is absolutely infuriating. And being divested from people's livelihood, when people say business isn't personal, that like makes my blood boil, because people's livelihoods are personal. And when our work is so closely tied to our ability to live and our health insurance, we need to start having those conversations. And I do think that there's a place for hard work in society. But I think the kind of hard that we are experiencing right now is not it. It's like we need to work hard at work worth doing. And work worth doing means when our productivity yields profits that are reinvested back into workers and not just funneled to the C-suite. So from like 1979 to 2022, I might be a little bit off with the stats, but CEO pay has risen like 1,200%, and average worker pay, it's only like 15%. So we're more productive than ever, but we are not seeing the reward for it. And that's why you see trends like quiet quitting, great resignation, lazy girl jobs, all of these different things as an attempt for workers to fight back. So the people who say like you need to work hard, it's yes, but yes and. Because CEOs can read 200 books a year because they aren't working. They're not shouldering the brunt of it. And most of the clients that I work with are burnt out. They are under-resourced and overworked. And that translates into, I think the latest stat that I saw from Gallup was $1.9 trillion lost in productivity due to burnout and worker disengagement. So we're working hard, but at what cost? And there's a book that I really like by Bonnie Ware. It's called Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. She was a palliative nurse in Australia. And one of the top 5 regrets of people who are in end-of-life care, who are about to transition out of this life, is I wish I hadn't worked so hard. So I think we can learn from the people who have worked hard for their entire lives and prioritized, things that we're not going to be eulogized for ultimately, not to be morbid, to kind of level set and say, like, is the work that we are doing meaningful to us, not, to our families, our communities, the world at large? And how do we work hard at the work worth doing rather than work that just creates endless surplus for the C-suite?
Wow. That is, again, that's deep. That's really deep when you sit down and think about that, because, how interesting, again, we've had this system, and honestly, I make people a little uncomfortable when I remind them that a lot of our systems are still the advancement of the chattel slavery system now made common. As a matter of fact, I did some research a while back that in 1860, it cost about $1,600 to buy a human being, which converted to about high $50,000 or $58,000. And because the average person in this country doesn't make that, I'd argue it's cheaper to buy people today than it was back in 1860.
Ooh, powerful.
We create this really interesting system, really interesting. And it's spread much further, obviously, folks like myself that have, folks from the African diaspora have taken more of the brunt of it, but there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people. And there's this really small group who benefits from all of this. So tell me what the difference is. I mean, really, tell me what the difference. We've made it cute. There's a whole lot of difference. And also, to the point about the people who actually do the work having no voice, I've just got real issues with that. I mean, I've said before, I will never work for anyone ever again. I'll work with people because my contribution to whatever you do is just as valuable as whatever your contribution is. And I don't care what your role is, because if you could do it yourself, you wouldn't need me. And if you don't need me, hire somebody you think you do. But I don't, I don't get it. I tell folks, don't get a job that you need. Get one that you want. Because, I mean, folks set themselves up by, again, do you really need a house that big? Do you really need a car or a vehicle that big? And then you lash yourself to that because I've got bills to pay and all of that. I mean, this is you talked about your 10-year journey. Mine was about the same. And the thing I had to do was get myself less dependent on other people by getting myself out of debt. So I don't owe anybody anything. I'm not, I wouldn't be considered independently wealthy. I don't think. My net worth is probably pretty decent because I don't owe anybody stuff. So I don't have to work for you. I don't have to do any of that type of thing. And I've created enough ways to be able to take care of the needs that I have. Yeah, well, I don't have a 50,000 square foot house, but I don't need one either. I like the one I have. And so I don't have to put up with the ways, particularly the ways that people treat you emotionally. I want you to chat about that a little bit too. So what responsibility do you think for these folks who want to do it right? I mean, do businesses, do organizations who want to bring people in, what kind of responsibility do you think they have for the mental and physical safety of the folks that they bring in?
Yeah, I think that they bear the brunt of the responsibility for making sure that their people are taken care of. I kind of chuckle at the term like human resources, that we are treating people as resources and not as people. What we're seeing right now is that I think it's another Gallup's study that said only 18% of people in management positions actually display management or leadership qualities, which means over 80% of people who are currently leading teams are unfit to lead, and we're not taught any type of leadership development. And culture is really shaped from the top down. It's easy to slap a value on your website and say we value diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? But if I'm looking at your C-suite and it's a bunch of old white men, or if I'm looking at your DEI department, if you have one, and you've put the brunt of that on Black people without compensating them fairly, or you expecting them to want to do that work for your organization, like, do you really embody the value that you say that you do? So I think it takes some candid conversations, which is difficult with certain people in leadership because they have ego problems. And I think it starts with, first and foremost, realizing that your employees do not have to care as much as you do in leadership. They're not being compensated like you are. They're not benefiting as much as you are. So make sure that they are being compensated fairly for the work that they do based on fair market value. Really, really simple. And how do they have paths forward to continue to learn and earn?
Right. Yeah, this is. Go ahead.
And then what are some of the mechanisms that you have in place to make sure that burnout is going to be prevented or repaired? And how are you not just being a manager, but being a true leader and mentoring your people? I think we have a responsibility when we spend as many hours as we do at work to make sure that we are hearing our employees' personal and professional goals and creating pathways to get there, and trusting that they know what's best for their own life. So I think that employers bear the brunt of the responsibility for creating those mental and physically safe work conditions for the people under their employ.
I'm absolutely convinced that the solution to, and again, I heard all the time that, there's a labor shortage. There's not a labor shortage at all. There's an incompatibility between what you want people to do and the kind of environment you want to put them in and what people want to take from you. Because there's 8 billion people on the planet. There are plenty of folks who have the capacity, capability, and even interest in doing the work that you might have for them. But what they don't want is horrible pay, lack of leadership. They don't want to be physically abused. They don't want to do that. And you talked about it earlier, the fact that we now have so many digital natives who were born with access to technology. They're just smarter than you are, old people. They just are. And old people is not necessarily always a birthday's distinction. There are people in their 30s that are kind of old as well because they've got that old mindset that says I have to micromanage people and work hard, and because this is what my dad told me and my mom told me. I'm going to pass it on to other people. What you're passing along is trauma and issues and lack of psychological and physical safety, and then you wonder why people leave. No one is going to leave an environment where they feel safe and supported and loved and cared about and welcome. Nobody's going to leave that. They're just not, because they enjoy it too much. So people are leaving because that's not there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And it's funny too how we're in a conversation right now where people my age and younger, millennials and Gen Z, we're trying to rally for a living wage right now, not like a thriving like wage. We just want to be treated like with dignity and respect and as human beings. And the fact that there are people in leadership or in other generations too who are just like, well, no, just stop being whiny and lazy and work harder. It's like, where is the empathy and the emotional intelligence? I think we have a responsibility to look at younger generations. Like, I am hyper aware of what Gen Z and even Gen Alpha is going to start talking about, because it's my responsibility to trust in the world that they see in front of them and try and help usher in what they're asking for. Not ignore them and say like settle for the status quo. This is just the way things are. Traditionally, like this is the way things have been is not, a historically good argument. So we need to do better.
Yes, no, I agree. There's a part of me that sometimes wonders if I wasn't a Gen Zer born about 30 or 40 years too early, honestly, because I now hear and see people saying the same thing. I've been in the workforce for 5 decades. I started I started 10 or 11 years old throwing newspapers, and have bounced around from spot to spot. Even I was in the fire rescue service for 32 years, but I had, I think I probably lost count, 37 or 38 different roles. Why? Because do this for a while, and often I got moved because I wouldn't complain because I liked the idea of learning something new, but it was rare. I was around people who would do the same thing in the same spot. I worked with a person once who worked at the same fire station for 36 years and rarely, if ever, left the community that he lived in. And again, part of me, I used to kind of say, well, what was wrong with him? Now I'm saying, well, that's okay, but I don't want to do that. And so I'm not here to criticize how people live their lives. I'm really not. I'm not saying that it's bad, that these generations I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. I'm saying that some people see it different, and our systems are too limiting. They're too limiting. During the pandemic, there was a webinar I attended that had 3 of the Fed chairs on. One of them was the one from the Atlanta area, who at the time was the only Black Fed chair. And he made the comment that stuck with me. He said that there are, and I could have the numbers a little bit off, but right around $3 trillion worth of economic development and prosperity we've missed out because we don't treat everybody fair. We say your idea is better and yours isn't because of how people look in the communities that they live in. And we've missed out on all kinds of creative, different ways of doing things because everybody has to do it this way. And I'm simply suggesting that, well, not everybody wants to do that. And if you want a real free market, if you really want to go there, let's go there. Let's see what it looks like when people really have the opportunity to compete, when they really get the opportunity to go to the place that's going to treat them the best.
Yeah. Yeah. And we see like the data shows us that, the circumstances that you are born into really determine your socioeconomic mobility, especially under the capitalist system that we currently operate under, which isn't true capitalism, in my opinion. So like if you are a white dude who gets like C's, statistically, you are going to do better than someone from a marginalized community who gets straight A's because of how deeply ingrained some of these ideas are in our like DNA at this point. And I think that we are living, the generations are very much living in different worlds. There are some bright spots of like, the boomer generation is the last generation that had the American dream fully realized, right? they were able to work and have pensions, and they're going to be able to collect some social security. But like, we're not being represented fairly by our government institutions. They're not listening to the things that we say that we want and we need, and it's becoming unsustainable. Like, the past 4 years, in terms of what we need to survive, a roof over our head, being able to afford that, even rent, like when just how, like, where we live takes up such a significant portion of our income. You're burning people out, and that burnout prevents people from accessing the creativity and the collaboration that leads to true innovation that's going to advance our society forward. So we've created this, I don't even know what to call it, just this vacuum. Yeah, this vacuum, this toxic system where it's just not going to be doable for a lot longer. And it's like you said, Gen Z surpassing boomers in the workforce this year. So you're going to about to see some rapid changes.
Yeah, I heard once, sometimes progress comes one retirement at a time sometimes. And I am hopeful, and the hopeful part of me says that some of it's just about the numbers, that you can't continue to hold the majority down. You just can't. And what I found is, so it used to be, if we were to look back over the history of work in general in the U.S., that of course, we had that period of time in the 1700s when 97 or so percent of the folks who were employed, if you will, were in agriculture. Of course, there was a good percentage of folks who didn't get paid at all. That's a whole nother conversation. And now we flipped. There's only about 3% were involved in all these other things, and it's more of a knowledge economy. But the way that old economy was maintained was through brute force. It really was. It became less and less overt. But when folks moved off farms and went into industry, there were children going to work. There were folks getting their arms and legs cut off, and there was, that's just the way it is. We'll toss you on a scrap heap. Our entire workers' compensation system, first of all, it's old and outdated, but it started because, if they cut your arm off, maybe we should give you a little something for your arm.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's a maybe. So we're now in a situation, again, in the United States, if you don't physically injure me, you can generally get away with no compensation whatsoever for how you treat me. And so what it's now been, now I just emotionally beat you down. I don't leave any physical scars, but I leave so much emotional trauma about, the micromanaging and the bullying and the lack of growth. And I get in your head, and then when you start doing things like substance using or what have you to try to deal with, then I get ready for that. So it's a really interesting kind of, again, toxic brew, but I honestly believe that it's cracking, and it's cracking because folks like you figured it out, and then you actually started telling people, and you created a space where you could tell people, and whoever they couldn't stop you from sharing your voice and sharing what you had to share. So again, all groups aren't monolithic. Have you found some boomers that get it and some Gen Zers that don't?
Yeah. Well, you are here, so we found one that got it.
Right.
Yes, I do see boomers who get it, and there's a lot who don't. And it's easy to have like an echo chamber on social media, but there are a lot of boomers in my direct messages who say, like, thank you for the work that you're doing. I see how my kids are struggling, and I don't understand how we got here. So like, we're cheering you on. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And they're realizing some things about their own experiences too, where maybe they were not treated fairly. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And then there are some Gen Zs who also don't understand it too, because they're too invested in their phone and disassociated, if you will, from the world around them. I think one of the things that's interesting from the past week with the Met Gala and celebrity culture and the blocking movement with celebrities that's going on is you have some young generations who really love following along the elite, and want to continue to invest in those things that keep them not paying attention. Like, it's easier to follow what the Kardashians are doing than pay attention to how to improve circumstances in our own lives. So I do see some of that on both sides, but I think the more that we can share these ideas and create space for conversations and be willing to sit with where we're triggered and say, like, where is that coming from? What is that within myself that maybe I need to look at and heal a little bit? The more that we advance forward and we all take those small collective steps, then it becomes a bigger movement altogether.
Right, right. So, so as we conclude, this has just gone by so fast.
We can talk about this stuff all day,
all day long. It's just really, it's really exhilarating. But so what's next for you and for your consulting practice and what's next?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So for the past several years, I have been doing a lot of coaching one-on-one and in group capacities with, mid-level or lower employees. And what's next is I'm going to be transitioning into some B2B organizations and consulting with them on how to build more human-centered KPIs into their work cultures, into their performance review processes, into their leadership development initiatives. So we can start spearheading some of that change from the inside out and holding some of these institutions accountable to creating the change as well.
Right, right. Yeah, it would be. I really believe in prevention. I think that that old dude from back in the day, Ben Franklin, said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I think we do have the opportunity, again, with voices such as yourself, as we're getting startups, as we're getting new businesses formed, to help them form in a different way than the incubator that they were in or the models that they've seen with this human-centered approach. That it's, again, I could be wrong. I don't think I am. It hasn't been that way for me. But I really believe that the more you focus on the humans, the money will come.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
I do.
Yeah, and it's not a hard concept either. These are relatively small changes that these organizations can make that will make a massive impact.
That's right. Yeah, again, I often say people don't shoot holes in a boat that they're actually in. And often what's happened is these boats have been built by somebody else. Folks were kidnapped, dragged onto them, and they're out in the middle of the ocean now, and they're going like, why am I here? And if we simply had these more kind of inclusive kinds of opportunities to say, look, what are we getting out of this? What's good for us? Not what's just good for you, the CEO, or you, the board, or you, the people in power, but what's good for all of us. And what I really believe that what's good for one of us is good for all of us. If we continue to focus on all of us, it'll be good for everybody. Yeah,
totally agree. I think that we will see some of the results of all of these efforts within our working lifetimes. I have to hold on to hope for that. We're seeing legislation that is already passing to protect workers in more capacities. We're seeing legislation working toward 4-day work weeks. So I think that we'll see all of that. So I'm definitely hopeful.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, Danielle, thank you so much. As I said before we come on, I have been looking forward to this conversation for quite a while. I'm an admirer from a distance. As a matter of fact, I actually thought you were a Gen Zer. I didn't realize you're a millennial.
Well, thank you. My skincare routine must be doing a great job.
That's cool. No, seriously. No, but I so admire the work that you're doing and just want to encourage you to continue to have your voice and continue to share. There are folks who will hear it from you that won't hear it from me because they think I'm some old dude. But it doesn't matter to me who people hear it from, it's that they hear the message that work doesn't have to be toxic. It doesn't have to be psychologically, mentally, and physically unsafe for you. It doesn't have to be. And a lot of that, we're going to have to create that together. So thanks very much for what you shared. So if you're watching or listening to this podcast for the first time, welcome. I hope that something you've heard will bring you back. Previous episodes of the podcast can be found at psychealthandsafetyusa.com. You can watch, like, and subscribe and share the podcast on the Flourish DX YouTube page. Please join the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting to us on LinkedIn. And stay tuned and look out for the next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Thanks very much. Tune in each week for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to David at id2-solutions.com. Or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.